My name is Lorraine Castor. The day my father handed my brother the keys to a brand new Lexus, right in front of me, he said, "You don't deserve something this nice." It felt like my entire life of being the good daughter was erased in a heartbeat. But that day, something in me snapped, and I finally chose myself.
Stay with me until the end.
Then tell me, did I do the right thing by walking away? I'd really like to know what you think. It was a Saturday afternoon in early September. The kind where the light shifts just a little, where the edges of things turn gold before anyone realizes summer's leaving. I was driving through Boise with the windows cracked, letting in that dry, almost sweet air. And even though the sky was clear, there was this tightness in my chest I couldn't quite explain. I was on my way to my dad's house. He'd called 2 days earlier, said he was putting together a small dinner. Just a family thing, he'd said. Might as well go ahead and give some stuff away while I still remember what's what. I wasn't sure what that meant, but I nodded along like always. That's what I'd been doing most of my life, nodding along. When I pulled into his driveway, I saw the others were already there. My brother's car was parked front and center, shiny as ever. A few of our cousins had come too, folks I hadn't seen in months, maybe years. I sat in my car a minute longer than I needed to, hands resting on the wheel. My reflection in the rearview mirror looked calm. But that wasn't the whole story. Inside, the house still smelled like old carpet and wood polish, like it hadn't changed since my mother passed. Dad was in the kitchen, sleeves rolled, slicing ham with the same knife he used every holiday. He didn't look up when I walked in. Just said, "There she is," like I'd wandered in late to a meeting I wasn't quite invited to. I smiled anyway. My brother, Dean, grinned when he saw me. Always the charmer. He came over, gave me one of those half hugs that don't really land. "Hey, stranger," he said. "Hey yourself," I replied.
Dinner was simple.
Roast beef, sweet corn, mashed potatoes. Everyone talked over each other, laughing loud, like this was just another good memory in the making. But I could feel something hanging in the air.
A shift.
Something rehearsed. Then Dad cleared his throat. "I figure it's time I start handing things down," he said. "You know, before time does it for me." Everyone quieted. He walked over to a cabinet and pulled out a small wooden box. Set it on the table like it was something sacred. Inside, nestled in black velvet, were a pair of car keys. The kind that came with luxury. A Lexus logo, polished sharp. My stomach twisted. "I picked up something new last week," he said. "Figured I'd give it to someone who's earned it." He turned, walked straight past me, and handed the keys to Dean. "You deserve something nice," he said, clapping him on the back. The table erupted in applause. Some clapped slow, unsure. A cousin shot me a quick glance, then looked away. Dean laughed, said something like, "Thanks, Pop," but all I could hear was the blood in my ears. I managed to smile. That kind of frozen smile you do when your whole body's trying not to show anything. My hands were under the table, fingers twisted into each other. I tried to swallow the lump in my throat and said, "Was there a reason it wasn't for both of us?" Dad didn't hesitate. "Because you wouldn't appreciate something this nice. That's not who you are."
Just like that.
In front of everyone. Like it was an objective fact. Nobody said a word. Not even Dean. Forks went back to plates. A chair creaked. Someone coughed. And then, just like that, the conversation picked up again, as if nothing had happened. I excused myself to the bathroom, washed my hands even though they weren't dirty, looked at myself in the mirror. Same face I saw every morning, but something in it had shifted. Something pulled tighter. When I came back, Dad and Dean were standing outside, already admiring the new car. A silver Lexus RX, parked perfectly on the lawn like it belonged there all along. Dean ran his hand across the hood like a game show winner. Dad lit a cigarette and nodded, proud. I stood by the doorway, watching. That car, it wasn't just a car. It was a sentence. A summary. It was him saying, "You'll never be enough, no matter how long you try." I didn't cry that night. But the next day, I did something I'd never done in 43 years of living under that man's shadow. And once I started, there was no going back. I left without saying goodbye. I don't know why, but my mind drifted back to high school. There was a time I asked Dad to help pay for a music class at the community center. I wanted to learn piano, just something to do after school, something that made me feel full. He barely looked up from his newspaper and said, "Don't waste money on stuff that won't get you fed." I remember laughing at the time like it was just a joke. But that laugh stuck in my throat for years. And now, sitting in the dark, I could feel it coming back up. Was he right? Was I the kind of person who didn't deserve nice things? Had I just learned to live with less because I convinced myself that was what I was worth? I wanted to scream. Not in anger, but in grief. Because somewhere along the line, I stopped expecting good things. I stopped asking. But then something else stirred. Not sorrow, not shame. Anger, yes, but quieter.
Sharper.
The kind that didn't want revenge, just wanted truth. I didn't go home. Not right away. I drove aimlessly until I pulled into the empty lot behind a grocery store, parked under a flickering streetlight, and pulled out my phone. My finger hovered over the call list. I didn't know who to call. I didn't want to explain. I wanted to hear a voice that didn't make me feel like I was broken. So, I tapped a name I hadn't thought about in a while. Kendra Holt. She answered on the second ring. "Lorraine," she said, cautious. Like, maybe I dialed her by mistake. "Yeah," I whispered.
Hey.
"You busy?" There was a pause, then the warmth kicked in.
No.
"Not for you. What's going on?" I didn't answer right away.
Just took a breath.
"Can we meet?"
I asked.
"I don't want to talk over the phone. I need a minute with someone who won't try to fix me." She didn't ask questions. Just said, "Ray's table at 11 tomorrow. I'll be there." The next morning, I walked into that little cafe tucked between an old bookstore and a laundromat. Smelled like vanilla and toasted bread. There was music playing low, Fleetwood Mac, I think. Kendra waved me over from a table by the window. She looked the same. Just a few more smile lines and a quiet calm that felt earned. We hugged. Not too long. Not too tight. Just right. We talked about surface things for a bit. Jobs, weather, rent going up. I sipped coffee that was too hot and let it burn the roof of my mouth. It felt good to feel something. Even if it was just that. And then she said it, just like that. "You know," she said, stirring her tea, "I don't think I ever told you how much what you did meant to me." I blinked. "What I did?" She looked up, eyes soft. "When I got pregnant. When my family basically shut the door on me, you didn't. You sent money. You helped me get that lawyer. You called every week just to ask how I was sleeping." I stared at her. I remember calling. But I didn't think I did all that. "You did," she said gently. "And I've never forgotten." That hit me like a wave. Because the truth was, I had forgotten. Or maybe I just never gave myself credit for it. I sat there, silent, watching a couple walk past outside with a dog and matching scarves. And I realized something I hadn't allowed myself to think in a long time. I wasn't some shadow walking around waiting to be seen. I had been someone to other people. I had mattered. Maybe not to my father. Maybe not in the ways I thought I needed. But still. That was the first time in years I left a conversation feeling taller than when I walked in. Not loud, not bold, just less invisible. And it scared me a little, because now I couldn't pretend I didn't deserve more. And if I knew that, what excuse did I have to keep staying small? A few days passed before he called. The number lit up on my screen while I was heating up leftover soup, and for a second, I just stared at it. I thought about letting it go to voicemail. But something in me, probably the part still trained to obey, hit answer. His voice was calm, steady. Too steady. "Lorraine, I think we need to have a real talk," he said. I didn't reply right away. He went on. "I'm not mad. I just think it's time we clear the air. Come by tomorrow afternoon." That was how he always did it, packaged confrontation inside something that sounded like resolution. Like he was doing me a favor. When I arrived the next day, he was already seated on the porch, sipping coffee from the same chipped mug he'd had for years. There was no, "Hi, no, how've you been?" Just a wave of his hand, motioning me to sit. "You made things awkward the other night," he said, straight to the point. Everyone could feel it. I blinked. I made it awkward. He nodded. I don't know what you expected me to do. Buy 2 luxury cars? You could have at least been gracious instead of sulking. I wasn't sure whether to laugh or scream. I wasn't sulking, I said. I was hurt. You humiliated me in front of the whole family. He leaned back, unbothered. Don't be dramatic. Dean's had a rough few years. He needed the encouragement. And I didn't. Asked, voice rising. You ever stop to think about what I needed? He shrugged. You've always handled yourself. Dean, he needs a push now and then. You always act like you're above needing help. That landed hard. Not because it was new, but because I'd heard it in so many forms from so many mouths. I almost believed it. I took a breath. Do you even realize how much you favor him? It's not subtle, Dad. He waved his hand. Oh, please. Don't pull the poor me routine. I raised 2 kids. I did my best. Just because I don't fall over myself praising you doesn't mean I don't care. I looked at him, really looked. The deep lines under his eyes, the stubbornness in his jaw. I wanted to reach something human in him. But all I saw was defense, layered, fortified, practiced. You never made me feel seen, I said quietly. Not once. He snapped. Don't use that tone with me, he said sharply. I gave you food, a roof, an education. Everything you have came from me. I stood up. Everything I have came in spite of you. He froze. Just for a second. I didn't wait for response. I grabbed my purse and walked off the porch. My hands were shaking as I got into the car. I sat there for a moment, trying to steady my breathing, but the words kept echoing. You don't appreciate anything. Everything you have came from me. I went home and pulled out the old photo albums from the hallway closet. Albums Mom had put together. She'd always been the one with the camera. I flipped through birthdays, holidays, graduations. Over and over, I noticed the same pattern. Dean front and center, arms around Dad. And me, always on the edge of the frame. Smiling, but never quite part of the picture. I sat there until my legs went numb. I hadn't cried yet. Not fully. Something in me still hadn't cracked open. The next morning, I got a call from a coworker, Susan. Lorraine, have you seen Facebook today? I rubbed my eyes.
No.
Why? She hesitated. Your dad posted something. With Dean. And a caption that, well, I thought you should know. I opened the app, and there it was. A photo of Dean leaning against the Lexus. Dad beside him, both grinning wide. The caption read, Not everyone with a degree knows how to value family. I stared at it for a long time. Not because I was surprised, but because it was the first time the shame had been made public. That one line, so clean, so calculated, cut sharper than any outburst ever could. It wasn't just about the car, or the keys, or the decades of quiet favoritism. It was about the message, the punishment, the way he wanted everyone to know I wasn't the good one. My throat tightened. I set the phone down and stepped outside. The sky was pale gray. The air smelled like early fall. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked. And all I could think was, he didn't just shut the door on me. He made sure everyone saw him do it. And suddenly, staying silent didn't feel like grace anymore. It felt like surrender. The days that followed bled together like gray watercolor soaking into cheap paper. No edges, no definition, just a soft, dragging blur. I kept showing up to work, logging in, smiling at the right times, even remembered to bring Susan a muffin on her birthday. But inside, I was hollowing out. Slowly. Quietly. Like a leak I couldn't patch. The thing about grief, because that's what it was, even if no one had died, is that it's not always loud. Sometimes, it's just the feeling of sitting in your own skin and realizing you don't quite belong there anymore. I found myself second-guessing everything. Was I being dramatic? Was this all just leftover teenage resentment I'd never quite shaken off? Maybe I had misread the tone. Maybe the car didn't mean what I thought it meant. Maybe. The guilt came dressed in voices I'd outgrown but never really left behind. The 12-year-old me, who wanted to please. The 16-year-old who practiced smiling in the mirror so Dad wouldn't say I looked tired or cold. The 25-year-old who stayed late to clean up after family dinners and was told she didn't have to act like a martyr. And yet, none of those girls ever stopped trying. I thought about disappearing. Not dramatically, just quietly. No more calls, no more holidays, no more last-ditch efforts. But right behind that idea came the old familiar fear. Would I be the daughter who gave up? Would people call me ungrateful? Would I be the one who ruined the fragile thread of family just because I couldn't take one more insult wrapped in silence? That word, family, used to carry warmth. Now it felt more like a word people used to trap you in a version of yourself you didn't agree to play anymore. I called Kendra. We met Thursday at Ray's table, like always. It was gray outside, a kind of soft, unthreatening gloom. She had her hair up in a messy bun and that old gray hoodie with the bleach mark near the elbow. The one her ex hated. She wore it now like a quiet rebellion.
I didn't do the small talk this time.
I sat down, ordered tea, and said, "If I cut him off, does that make me a bad person?" She didn't blink.
No, she said.
It makes you a person who has limits. I pressed my hands around my cup like I was trying to warm something more than just my fingers. But he's my dad. And you're his daughter, she replied. Not his sponge. Not his apology. Not a trophy for how he turned out. I let that sit between us. It was too much and exactly what I needed. I've tried so hard to be the bigger person, I said. You've been trying to be the bigger person for so long, she said gently. You forgot you're allowed to be a whole person. That line, it cracked something open, like a window I didn't realize had been painted shut for years. She looked out the window, then added, "You know my dad sold my mom's old jewelry box after she died.
Didn't ask me.
Just gave it to a neighbor lady for $10. Said it was just stuff." My stomach twisted. Are you serious? Dead serious. He said it was time to move on. But it wasn't about the jewelry. It was about erasing her. She was the only softness left in that house, and he couldn't stand it. Her words dropped like stones in my chest. That night, back in my apartment, I sat curled up on the couch, flipping through memories like they were slides I hadn't labeled. Then one came sharp and clear. The red scarf. My mother's red scarf. She wore it every fall, even when it was still too warm, claiming it reminded her of Vermont and long walks through crispy leaves. She'd wrap it around her neck with this little flourish, like she was doing it just for herself. After she died, I couldn't find it. I figured it had gotten lost in the shuffle. But 2 weeks ago, when Dean climbed out of that shiny Lexus, I saw it. Folded neatly on the passenger seat like it belonged there. That scarf wasn't just fabric. It was hers. Her smell. Her comfort. Her permission to be soft in a house full of sharp corners. And he'd left it sitting next to fast food wrappers like it was nothing. That was it for me. I wrapped both hands around a mug I didn't even drink from anymore and whispered into the quiet, "I'm not going back." The words felt foreign. Not defiant. Not angry. Just new. Like tasting something you forgot you used to love. I said it again. I'm not going back. And I didn't feel like a traitor. I felt like someone stepping into her own name, her own breath, her own story. I parked the car near the bend in the river, right where the trail breaks and the water widens enough to reflect the whole sky. Mom used to bring me here when I was little. After long days at school, especially the ones where I came home quiet or tense, she'd load up a thermos of cocoa and a Ziploc bag of graham crackers, and we'd sit on that crooked old bench and just be. No lectures, no pep talks. Just her presence, steady and soft like the water beside us. The place hadn't changed much. The wooden bench was still there, older now, a little more bowed in the middle. The same oak tree hung over the river, its branches still heavy with memory, still swaying like it knew things it'd never say out loud. I shut off the engine but didn't take the key out. I wasn't planning to stay long. I didn't even know what I came for, exactly. Maybe just quiet. Or something that still felt like mine. In the passenger seat was an old spiral notebook I hadn't touched in years. The kind with torn corners, dog-eared pages, and faint coffee stains. I used to jot down grocery lists and half-finished poems in it, back when I thought expression could save me. back when I still believed I'd be heard. I picked it up and turned to a blank page. My hand didn't hesitate. It just knew. Dear Dad, I wrote. But this wasn't a letter meant to be sent. It wasn't an olive branch or a peace offering. It was a release. I wrote about the things I'd buried, words I swallowed when they stuck in my throat, looks I pretended not to notice, silences I filled with forced laughter. I wrote about the ache of never being enough, of being praised for being strong, while secretly breaking under the weight of all the unspoken expectations. I wrote about the Lexus, the keys, the sentence that gutted me like a fish. You don't deserve something this nice. And then, like a wave rising behind everything else, I wrote about Mom. I hadn't thought of this moment in years. Maybe because it hurt too much, or maybe because it was the one piece I'd been afraid to lose. But it came back now, clear and sharp, as if it had been waiting for the right time. We were in the laundry room. I was folding towels, and she was just sitting on the dryer, staring at the spinning clothes like they held a secret she couldn't name. Her voice barely rose above the hum of the machine. If you ever wake up one day, she said, and realize you're living the same life I did, don't stay. Don't wait. Don't tell yourself it's for the kids, or for the peace, or because it's too late. Just go, even if it costs you pieces. Back then, I nodded like I understood. I didn't. Not until now. I finished the letter with a trembling period, folded it into a tight square, and slipped it into an envelope. No name. No stamp. It wasn't for him. It was for me, to get the words out of my chest and into the world, even if no one else would ever read them. I leaned back in my seat, eyes closed, breathing in the kind of stillness you only notice after everything else has gone quiet. The air smelled like damp earth and fading leaves. A breeze came in through the cracked window and brushed against my face like the gentlest permission. Then I reached into the back seat and pulled out the scarf. The red one. Mom's. I had taken it from Dean's car the night of the dinner. Told myself it was temporary, just needed to hold on to something familiar. But deep down, I knew. I couldn't leave it there, stuffed between fast food wrappers and gym bags like it was just another forgotten item. I stepped out of the car and walked down to the edge of the river. The scarf felt light in my hands, but it carried weight. Years of fall mornings. The smell of lavender and that cedar shampoo she always used. The way she looped it once, then twice with a little tug and a wink like it was her secret ritual. The fabric was thinning, frayed at the corner. Stitched in places by her own careful hands. It wasn't just cloth. It was her. It was us. I took a lighter from my coat pocket, one I used to use for candles when the nights got too quiet, and held the flame to one end. The fire caught slow, curling upward like it, too, remembered her. I didn't cry. I watched. As the scarf burned, I whispered, more to her than to myself. You were never his to give away. The wind rose just then, catching the smoke and carrying it across the water. I imagined it finding her somehow wherever she was. I imagined her nodding, not with sadness, but with approval. It wasn't about destroying a memory. It was about reclaiming it, letting go of what had been misused, lifting it out of the role it had been reduced to. And as the last ember disappeared into the breeze, I felt it. Not anger, not pride, freedom. I didn't feel small anymore. I didn't feel like someone begging to be seen. I felt like someone who had finally heard her own voice and believed it was worth following. He showed up at my work. No call, no warning, just appeared in the parking lot like a bad memory that learned how to drive. I didn't even notice him at first. I was fumbling through my bag, trying to fish out my car keys between a half-melted lip balm and a crumpled grocery list when I heard it. Lorraine.
Just my name.
Flat. Heavy. Too familiar to ignore. I turned slowly, and there he was, my father. Same windbreaker he always wore when he wanted to look put together. Same look on his face, like he was evaluating something that came up short.
Me.
You haven't answered my messages, he said, not quite angry but not far from it. I stood still, arms folded across my chest. I wasn't afraid, just tired. Tired in the kind of way that doesn't show up in your posture, but in your bones.
I saw them, I said.
He squinted. You think ignoring me is going to fix things? I'm not trying to fix anything. He took a few steps forward, glancing around. We were in the side lot where the admin staff usually parked. It was quiet except for the hum of the HVAC system and a crow pecking at something in the grass nearby. A couple coworkers passed us on their way out. I gave them a small wave, just enough to signal. I'm okay. Keep walking. My father's voice dropped low, like he was about to tell a secret. You trying to make me out to be some kind of monster now? That what this silence is about? You want people feeling sorry for you? I blinked slowly. I'm not trying to make you look like anything, Dad. You've done a fine job of that on your own.
His jaw tightened.
His face flushed, and for a split second, I saw it. That flicker of disbelief. Like I'd thrown a glass of cold water on the version of me he kept stored in his head. Then it shifted.
Hardened.
You been telling your little friend stories about me? That make you feel brave? You think that makes you strong? I didn't raise my voice. I didn't step back. I just breathed. I didn't write to hurt you. I said, I wrote to survive. He laughed once, dry and clipped. You've changed. No, I said. I just stopped pretending. That landed harder than I expected. He stared at me for a long time, like he was reading a book he never meant to open. You used to be easier, he muttered. Yeah, I said. I used to be smaller. The silence that followed felt like someone holding their breath underwater. He shifted his weight from one foot to the other. I saw something flicker behind his eyes. Regret, confusion. Maybe just the dawning realization that I no longer fit inside the lines he had drawn around me. I think he expected me to crack, to soften, to reach for the invisible rope I used to tie between us whenever things felt close to falling apart. But I didn't move. I'm done, Dad, I said. With proving, with performing, with bending myself so you won't feel uncomfortable. He squinted, hands now clenched at his sides. You think you're better than me? No, I said. I think I finally stopped lying to myself. He swallowed hard. I could tell he wanted to say something cruel or dismissive, one last jab, but he didn't. Instead, he just stood there, looking older than I'd ever seen him, like someone trying to hold sand that kept slipping through his fingers. I guess you got what you wanted, he said bitterly. I didn't want this, I said. I just wanted a father who saw me. I turned, walked to my car, and opened the door. He didn't stop me. He didn't call after me. He just stood there while I drove away, smaller in the rearview mirror than I thought he'd be. Later that evening, after dinner, my phone buzzed. A voicemail from Dean. I didn't pick up. Just tapped play. You happy now? He said. His voice was tight-clipped. I don't know what you said to him, but he's been sitting in the living room in the dark for hours. Won't talk to anyone. You broke him. I let the message finish. Then I stared at the screen a while. And I deleted it. Not out of spite. Not out of anger. But because I didn't owe anyone a version of myself that bled just to keep their comfort. That silence, the one I used to fear, was no longer the sound of guilt. It was the sound of freedom. And I was the one who chose it. I didn't go back to say goodbye. I went because I had to, because there were still a few pieces of my life in that house, and I needed to gather them before I could close the door for good. A box of old yearbooks, some worn-out paperbacks Mom had marked with her delicate handwriting in the margins, and the ceramic lamp she found at a flea market one summer, the one she insisted had character, even though it had a hairline crack that ran along the base like a tiny fault line. She loved it anyway. I guess I did too. The house was silent when I arrived. Dean's truck wasn't in the driveway, and Dad's car was gone. I stepped inside and was greeted not by welcome, but by stillness. The kind that hums against your ribs. The air had that closed-up smell, stale fabric, old wood, and something faintly metallic, like a memory that sat out too long. I moved quickly, deliberately. I didn't want to give myself time to pause or sink. I knew better than to let the house wrap around me again like it used to. Don't let anyone teach you to shrink. Love always, Mom. I stared at the words for what felt like forever. She had seen me, long before I understood the weight I carried, Long before I tried to rewrite myself into something more digestible, she had already known. And she left me this. Quiet, tucked away, as if she knew someday I'd need it. That card was a mirror, and for once, I didn't look away. I wiped my face with the inside of my sleeve, folded the card with care, and slid it into my bag, closer to my heart than anything else I'd brought with me. That's when I heard the creak of the screen door. I turned, and there he was, Dad, standing in the threshold like a shadow that hadn't made up its mind yet whether it wanted to stay or go. No jacket, no hat. His eyes looked tired in a way that had nothing to do with sleep. I didn't know you were coming, he said. I didn't offer a smile. I didn't come for a conversation. Just picking up what's mine. He stepped into the room, moving slower than usual, like his joints ached or maybe the air felt heavier around me. I don't get you anymore, he said after a long pause. You used to make sense. I looked at him then. Not with bitterness. Not even pain. Just clarity. You don't have to get me, I said. I'm not asking for that. He rubbed a hand across his face, eyes flicking toward the box near my feet. Then what do you want? I stood and looked him in the eyes, really looked. I want you to know that I'm not standing behind anyone anymore.
Not you.
Not Dean. Not the version of me that makes you feel comfortable. He didn't fight back. Didn't argue. He just nodded, once slow, waited. Like he heard me, but didn't know where to put the words. I picked up the box and walked toward the front door. I paused just for a breath, halfway out. I thought about saying goodbye. I didn't. The sun was low now, turning the sidewalk gold. Leaves blew across the concrete like someone had just opened a book and scattered its pages. As I stepped down onto the porch, I heard a voice. Lorraine, Mrs. Nichols. Next door. Watering her planters like she had for decades. She looked at me the same way she did when I was 12 and scraped my knee in her driveway. You okay, honey? She asked gently. I smiled. This time, it reached my eyes. For the first time in my life, I said, yeah, I think I am. Then I opened the car door, set the box in the back seat, and slid behind the wheel. And this time I didn't look back. It's been a month. 30 quiet mornings, each one a little softer than the last. The kind of soft that doesn't demand your attention, but slowly, gently, reminds you you're allowed to exhale. I live in a small apartment now, just a few blocks from Ray's table. It's the kind of place where the floor creaks when I walk to the kitchen and the radiator hisses like it's muttering secrets. Nothing's fancy, but every inch of it is mine. And there's something holy about that kind of ownership, when the air around you doesn't belong to anyone else's expectations. Most days smell like rain now. It hasn't stopped pouring, not really, but I've learned to love the sound it makes when it taps the window. Like a soft knock checking in. At night, I leave the blinds half open just so I can watch the city blur through the glass, lights blinking slow and tired like they're tucking the world in for sleep. I've pulled back on work. On purpose. I still do freelance consulting, just enough to pay bills and keep my mind sharp, but weekends are mine. I've started volunteering at the community center, teaching a Saturday drawing class for kids. It's messy, loud, and weirdly sacred. 8 little voices calling out half-finished stories while smearing glitter glue across the table. It's not structured. It's not impressive. But it's real. Last weekend, a boy named Marcus handed me a drawing of a giraffe wearing a firefighter helmet, colored entirely in green. I made this, he said seriously, because you help people feel better. I smiled so hard it hurt. It wasn't the kind of success you could frame or measure, but something in me stood up a little taller. Dad used to say art wasn't a real plan. It doesn't feed you, he told me. No one listens to people who draw. But I think Marcus listened. I think he saw me. And that counts for more than most things. The text came on a Wednesday. I was drinking tea by the window, watching a woman in a yellow raincoat walk her dog across the street. The kettle still whistled in the background when I picked up my phone and saw his name. It wasn't long. Just one sentence. If you need anything, I'm still here. There was no apology. No reference to what had happened. Just a single line. Simple, familiar, hollow. I stared at it for a long time. Not with anger. Not even with disappointment. Just a quiet, steady ache.
He still didn't understand.
He still thought being here meant being in control, or being physically present, or sending help on his terms. He didn't know that what I needed wasn't assistance or advice or another car key handed to someone else. I needed release. I didn't respond. That night, it rained again, soft and steady, the kind of rain that made the streets glow. I walked to Kendra's. Her porch light flickered a little, like always. The smell of cinnamon drifted through the air before I even knocked. She hugged me in the doorway like she always does, quick, tight, no words. Dinner was pasta, garlic bread, and too much laughter. Jay, her son, sat across from me with marinara on his cheeks and his elbows squarely on the table. Kendra gave him a half-hearted elbows off that he ignored entirely. After we cleared the plates, he came back with a sheet of construction paper. "I made you something," he said, grinning with all the pride a 9-year-old can fit in his chest. He held it out like it was gold. A drawing. Stick figures. One with curly hair, me, standing between two others. One with a frown, one with a red heart. Above it, in crooked letters, "You are a good one." I didn't cry, but something inside me cracked just enough to let the light in. I laughed.
Softly.
The kind of laugh that doesn't chase sadness away, but folds it gently into something warmer. Later that night, back in my apartment, I sat by the window again. The street was quiet. The world outside felt softer, like it, too, was learning to rest. I caught a glimpse of myself in the glass. Same face, same shoulders, same tired eyes. But I didn't look like someone holding her breath. I wasn't carrying the weight anymore, the need to be seen by someone who only looked when I disappeared. I wasn't waiting for the kind of love that made me earn it over and over. I was just here.
Me.
Still his daughter. Still bearing his last name. Still owning a drawer of old photos and cards from birthdays he mostly forgot. But I'm no longer a shadow in his story. I've stepped out of the frame and picked up the pen. And now I'm writing my own. It started one Saturday in September when the light shifted through the blinds and I finally heard myself say, "Enough." And this time, when I closed the door behind me, it wasn't because I was walking away from someone else. It was because I had finally walked back to myself. Maybe you've been there too, sitting in silence, trying to hold a family together while slowly disappearing inside yourself. Maybe you've asked the same questions I did. Am I enough? Or am I just convenient? I don't have all the answers. But I know this, no one should have to shrink just to be loved. And walking away doesn't mean you stop caring. Sometimes, it just means you finally started caring about yourself too. If this story touched something in you, I hope you'll stay with me for the next one. We carry a lot, but we don't have to carry it alone.